are new here, my name is Ashley. Nice to meet you. And if you are not, welcome back. I am back with another book video today. We're doing a January, February, and March reading wrap up. We have about like 26-ish books to go through, so I probably won't give you a synopsis for each book, but we'll talk about what I rated it and what I thought of it and all that good stuff. A lot of you guys seem to really like my other book video, and I've been really excited about reading. The first book that I read in 2022 in January is The Heart Principle by Helen Hoang. This book just got my heart. I really loved it. I rated it a 5 stars. It talks about a lot of things such as like familial dynamics, autism, relationships. With those deeper topics, it is a really emotional book, and I was just rooting for the main character the whole time, and it just makes the end so much sweeter. The next book I read is really popular and for good reason, and that is It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. This book, oh my gosh, it put me in such a weird mood after I read it. I just didn't know how to feel about this when I was finished with it. Definitely search up trigger warnings before you read this book. It really hit close to home, and I really got really emotional when I read this, but it's one of those books that just leaves you with like this feeling after you read it, and like nothing else will compare to it. So I just can't recommend this enough. If you want to read this, go out and do it now, because it's an experience like no other. I rated this a 4.5 stars. I would have rated it a 5 stars, but it just made me so sad the days after I read it that I was like, I don't know if that's good, so I gave it a 4.5 stars. The next book I read in January was Paper Towns by John Green, and sadly, I really did not like this book. I thought that I would. Maybe if I read this when I was in middle school or high school, I would have liked it more, but to me, it was just boring, and I was just waiting for it to end. It was just so long, and then when you find out what happens in the end, it's like so anticlimactic, and I just didn't enjoy it that much. But I do know a lot of people love this book, so you could still give it a try, but it wasn't it for me. I actually gave this 2 stars. The next book I read in January is a middle grade. That is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. And this book is so atmospheric. It's kind of like a fairy tale, and I liked it, but it wasn't my favorite, and I have been going through different genres to figure out what kind of books I love, and I just want to try everything. So I tried a middle grade fairy tale / fantasy book, and it was okay. If you really love those kind of books, this would be perfect for you. But I did rate this a 3 stars. The next book I read is amazing. I'm always telling people to read this, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm sure you've heard of this book already, but if you haven't, wow. That's crazy. You need to go read this book. This is just everything you'd want in a book. When I was reading it, I like couldn't put it down, and if I had to put it down, I was thinking about it the whole time. I finished it in like a day, and I gave it 5 stars. I would recommend going into this book not knowing much about it, because it makes it so much more fun and really interesting to pick apart the story. The characters in this book are really well developed in my opinion, and they're imperfect, which makes you really understand them and kind of like them a little bit more. At least that's how I felt, and I just really recommend this book. This is definitely one of my favorite books that I've read this year. The next book I read is actually a graphic novel, and that is The Edge of the Spider-Verse, The Amazing Spider-Man, and I read this in one sitting. It was probably like 30 30 minutes to an hour. I loved it. It was amazing. I gave it 5 stars, and it really helped me get out of a little slump that I had after reading The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because it was so good and I was like, nothing is gonna compare to this book. But I read this and it really helped me get back into it, and I would really recommend it. The last book that I read in January was A History of Wild Places by Shay Earnshaw. This book was a good story and a really good idea. It reminded me of a lot of books that I used to like when I was in school, but it was just really slow in the beginning, which kind of made it a little boring for me. I kind of expected what was gonna happen, but it was still enjoyable, but it took me a while to get through. So I gave this 3 stars. The first book I read in February, oh my gosh, I can't. The first book I read in February was Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. I loved this book. It was 5 stars for me. I read it in a day. I could not put it down. It was so amazing. I loved the characters. I loved the story. The plot twist was insane. I was guessing the whole time what was gonna happen. I just didn't expect it at all, and it just really hit me right in the heart. This is definitely one of my favorite books, and I am so excited to read more of Colleen Hoover's books because the ones that I've read so far have been amazing. So that's Ugly Love. I recommend you read this if you read any books from this video. The next book that I read in February was Under Lock by Mariana Zapata. Look at the thickness of this bad boy. Mariana Zapata's books are slow burns, which means that the couple takes a really long time to get together, and you're kind of waiting until the end of the book for them to get together. I think they got together in the last like 100 pages maybe. Could have been earlier than that, but people say that this is one of her least slow burns, so that makes me nervous to read the rest of her books. But I really like this book. I like the grumpy sunshine trope that we had in this book. I couldn't get over like how mean the guy was sometimes though, so I did give this a 4.5 stars, but it could have been a 5 stars. It was just the guy, I couldn't forgive him for some things, you know. But I would really recommend this. I'm trying to read Mariana Zapata's books in order because sometimes the characters make cameos in the other books, and I just figured it would be better to understand it that way. But that's Under Lock. The next book I read is actually one that I read on Kindle Unlimited, so I'll insert a picture somewhere here so you guys can see the cover, even though I hate the cover. Sometimes romance books have these covers that have people on them, and it hurts because the stories are good. I started the Sinners of Saints series and I read Vicious, and these books are insane. These books are a little bit darker than a lot of the romances that I read, but I gave Vicious a 3.75 stars. And don't ask me why I was so specific, but that's the only rating that felt right. I just really was hooked by the story, but I didn't know if I liked the male protagonist as much as I would like to have. And some things he did, I was just like, no, you're not getting away with that. But he did get away with it. Well, I gave that a 3.75 stars. It was good enough for me to continue the series because the next book I read was Defy, and I should have read Defy first because it kind of explains what is happening behind the scenes. It gives you kind of like a background of what's gonna happen in the series. I definitely had to read it to understand the rest of the books, but it wasn't the most interesting. And I don't really like the teacher-student trope, so I gave this a 3.5 stars. It was still interesting, but it wasn't my favorite. So then I read Ruckus, and I think Ruckus has to be my favorite book in the Sinners of Saints series. and I just really got like attached to the characters. And you know when you're reading a book and the characters are just making so many excuses not to be together, but they obviously like each other. That's how I felt when I was reading this book, and I was just so mad I wanted to grab them and like shake them, like, come on, please, like, you're wasting time here. Especially because the woman in this book has health issues and she's not really expected to live as long as a lot of people are, and it's just like, you need to just do what's gonna make you happy, you know what I mean? But yeah, I liked that book, and that was Ruckus. The next book in the series that I read was Scandalous, and this is an age gap romance, which it didn't feel too weird. It also has a single parent trope, which I know a lot of people really like, but a lot of people really hate. So do with that information what you will. But I did like this one, and I gave it a 4 stars. It just wasn't as good as Ruckus. I did like that one better. After reading Scandalous, I could not finish the series. I just didn't feel like it. And at this point, I'd rather read what I want to read rather than force myself to read something just because I feel like I should. And so just because there was one book left in the series didn't mean I was gonna read it, because I didn't feel like it. So I took a break from that and I grabbed a book that I knew would be heartwarming, cute romance book, and that was Maybe Someday by Colleen Hoover. If you like music, or if you write music and you like romance books, you need to read this. The characters in this book write songs together, and you can like read the lyrics, and it's just so cute. And you can also listen to the album on Spotify because there's actual songs that go with it. So I just thought this book was so cute. I loved the story. There's like a reason that they couldn't be together in the beginning of this book, and it's just so heartbreaking because you see like how much they like each other, but they just couldn't be together, but you really understand why. And it's just like Colleen Hoover gets you in these situations that you're like, how? Like, I can't believe people actually have to go through these things, and it just hurts your heart. But then she kind of like pieces it back together again in the end, so I appreciate that. But I did give this 5 stars, obviously. That is actually a part of a 3-part series. The next book is Maybe Not, and this book follows the relationship of 2 people that you meet in Maybe Someday. And it's okay. It's kind of like Grumpy Sunshine, where the girl is grumpy and the guy is sunshine. So if you like that trope, maybe you'll like this. It's a novella, which means it's shorter. It was only 120 pages, and so I just like couldn't get attached to the characters enough to really care if they were together or not sometimes, which sounds bad, but I mean, it was okay. So I gave it a 3.5 stars. And the last book in this little set is Maybe Now. And Maybe Now follows 3 different relationships in this friend group, and it kind of pulls the other 2 books together into this one in a neat ending. I didn't really feel the need for the last relationship that we talk about in this book, but it was okay. I liked seeing the first 2 characters more in this book, so that's something. So I did give this a 4 stars. On to March. The first book that I read in March was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I would search up trigger warnings for this book because it does talk about some situations that might be triggering for some people, so definitely search that up. But I really liked this book. The whole idea of it is really cool. This library is basically a library between life and death, and each book is a different way your life could have gone. So we follow Nora, and she's basically trying to figure out a life that would make her happy. And so we go through a bunch of different lives with her, and I just really liked this book. I was just rooting for the main character so much, and I really just wanted her to be happy. It turned out to be a really great read for me. I rated this at 4.5 stars, and I honestly would read it again. I wish that there was more of this book. So yeah, that's the Midnight Library. The next book I read was from Kindle Unlimited, and that is Birthday Girl. And let me just say, I am so embarrassed that I love this book, to be honest. I gave Birthday Girl 4 stars, and I'm sure if you read romance or watch a lot of YouTube videos about books, you would have heard about it. So you probably know the synopsis, so do with that information what you will. You can read it, you cannot read it. I enjoyed it, so that's where I'm gonna leave it. After Birthday Girl, I was kind of in the mood for something a little bit darker. So I did go back to the Sinners of Saints series and read the last book. I know it was so late, but I'm happy I did it because when I came back with fresh eyes, I actually really enjoyed this book, and that is Bane. This book also deals with very heavy topics, so just search up the trigger warnings. I know I keep saying that, but it's really important because I don't want people to like waste their money on a book and time and then just like not have a good experience because it just wasn't for them. So definitely search up trigger warnings for this book, but I really loved it. The first 100 pages of this book were so bad. Sorry, but it was bad, and I was like so annoyed with a lot of things that were happening and how they were described, and I was like, whatever. But then after the two main characters meet each other, you see their connection, you see their friendship. It's just so good, and I really liked this book. I gave it a 4 stars. The book that I read next has to be one of my favorite books ever, and that is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. Excuse me, the cartoon covers of books get me. Like, I love this. This is so cute. And sometimes they're deceiving because sometimes the books will be like spicy and then they have this little cute cartoon cover. I'm like, you tricked me there. This book is amazing. It has science in it. This has the fake dating trope, which is very interesting, and it just kind of gets you to be like, is this part of the fake dating or is it real? Like, you're kind of questioning it sometimes. It is from one point of view, which kind of sucks, but I think it kind of plays well into the story because the guy like doesn't talk about his feelings ever. He's very like closed off, and she's kind of like guessing the whole time, like, does he like me? Is this real? No, it can't be, it can't be, it can't be. So it's just so fun to read. I read this in one day and I gave it 5 stars. So I really recommend you guys read this one. Next, I read another Mariana Zapata book, and that is Culty. And I know a lot of people love this book, so I was really excited to read it. I did read it on Kindle Unlimited. A lot of Mariana Zapata's books are on Kindle Unlimited, which kind of makes the book go by faster because her books are very thick. But if you're just swiping on a tablet or a phone, it's just, it feels shorter and easier to read. And I really admire how she writes these slow burn romances without them being boring, because I was not bored a second in this book. I loved it, and I love the banter between the characters, the competitiveness between them. The last 100 pages of this book had me smiling like an idiot. I was just like, you go through this book and it's so thick that you like get very invested in the story and in the characters, that when they finally get together, it's just like the best thing ever. And I really like this book. I gave it 4 stars. After finishing the Sinners of Saints series, I decided to start the All Saints High series, which is following the kids of the couples in the Sinners of Saints series. So I was expecting it to be kind of similar, but to me, they're very different. The first one is Pretty Reckless, and the story was okay. It did take me a little longer to read because I felt like there was just so much going on and I was like not in the mood for that. But it did give me a little bit of Gossip Girl vibes, but like darker. So it was a little bit too much for me at some points, but it was a good setup for the series. So I ended up just taking a little break from it, but I went back to it eventually. So the first book was a 3-star for me. Next, I read a book that goes along with the first book that I read this year, which is The Heart Principle. The Heart Principle is actually the last book, so I am reading these out of order, but that's just how it went with my book of the month journey. But I read The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang, and this book, Oh my gosh, it's just so beautiful. I loved the characters in this book. You get to know them and you get to love them. You get to see their relationship grow throughout the book. Stella, which is the girl in this book, is just really socially awkward and she has trouble with relationship. So she hires Michael, who is an escort, and she's kind of trying to figure out how to navigate these relationships, and he's trying to help her feel more comfortable with herself, teaching her that it is important to voice your wants and needs in a relationship. And this book talks a lot about consent, and it was just really good. I loved everything about it. I loved the characters, I loved the journey, I loved the subjects that were talked about in this book. So I really recommend this one. I gave it 5 stars. Really good. After that, I went back into the All Saints High series and I read Broken Night. This book was a good read. I did give it 3 stars just because the miscommunication in this book really just angered my soul. If you don't like miscommunication, you won't like this book. It was really annoying, like how things would happen and it could have been fixed with one little conversation, or somebody mistook something, somebody misunderstood something, and then we spent the next 100 pages trying to solve the problem, and it was so frustrating. But the end of the book tied it really well together again, and I was really happy with the last 100 pages of the book, so that's why it was a 3-star. But the beginning, I was just so mad. After that, I was really in the mood for something different, so I ended up picking up House of Holo by Crystal Sutherland. And after I read this book, I was so confused. I didn't know what to rate it. It was just like, it took my brain and mixed it all up like spaghetti, and then the book ended. So I didn't know whether I liked it or not, to be honest. I honestly didn't know the genre of this book either. Some say it's horror, some say it's something else. I don't know. It was insane. I did appreciate the writing because the writing was really good, and I know that if you really like books like this, you would love this book. Hey guys, I'm back. Sorry about the lighting change. It started storming outside and it got super dark, so maybe I should finish this video. But I did give this book a 3.5 stars because I loved the descriptive writing. I loved the mystery, and I really liked the sister dynamic in this book. There's 3 sisters in this book, and it's just really cool to see their relationship, but also very creepy. And I managed to squeeze one last book into March on the 30th. And that is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. This book was pretty cool. It was really fast-paced and I really enjoyed reading it. I could not put it down. I ended up giving this a 4 stars. It had everything you would want in a book. It had mystery, family dynamics, romance, just so much that it just made it so interesting and fast-paced, and I just really enjoyed it. And I recommend this book to really anyone. I hope this video wasn't too long for you guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see more book videos, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. That would help me a bunch and lets me know that you like my book videos. And it would be really fun if you guys would comment down below what books you read in January, February, or March, and let me know which ones were your favorite. If you read any books that I have read in this video, let me know your thoughts down below. I would really love to hear it. But that's gonna be all until next time, guys. Thanks for spending time with me today, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.